Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 685 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our ninth book just came out. It's called From Letters to Leaders, The Legacy of Service. So I want you to go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, there are so many great business ideas that come from college dorm rooms all across the country it's so many that I've lost count. Just last weekend, the Mu chapter of Sigma Pi at Cornell gave an entrepreneurial award to a guy by the name of John Zimmer. Now, John is the co-founder of Lyft. So he developed this idea of ride sharing, and he developed it while he was at the Sigma Pi house in Ithaca. And he originally actually called it Zimride. So it had a totally different name at that point. So you, as college students, should always be looking for a need. And it shouldn't be what your parents want you to do. It should be some opportunity or some gap that you see in the marketplace that you can uniquely fill. And then you can develop your skills and your network to ultimately fill that gap. A perfect example is our next guest. Rei Vardi is the founder and CEO of Eon. He started it as a side project in his dorm room at Boston University and built it into a national EV mobility platform with over 3,000 cars in over 30 cities. And the great thing is he bootstrapped everything and reached scale without raising outside capital, which is almost unheard of today. Eon connects underused electric vehicles to people and companies that need flexible access. So the renters, they get a simple way to drive an EV, and owners earn passive income through their virtual fleet model. This platform has generated over $10 million for owners and has helped save over 16 million pounds of CO2. So Ray's background in biomedical engineering, and so he's always been interested in building these real world systems. So Eon grew out of that. And most of his work now is focused on improving automation, expanding their network, and making the experience as simple as possible for both the renters and also the owners. Welcome to the show, Ray.
Hey, how's it going, man? It's a
Hey, it's
pleasure to be here.
going really well. It's an honor to have you on the show. I know a lot of Gen Z, they're all entrepreneurs at heart. So I think your story is really going to resonate with them. So thank you for being here.
No, thanks, Michael. I'm really excited.
Of course. Now let's go back to Boston University, an absolutely incredible university, by the way, one of my favorites in the country. And you actually went from researching Alzheimer's at BU to building a national EV company, all from your dorm room. So, what was that moment when you knew that you had to walk away from the safe path and get into this national EV company?
Yeah, absolutely. So the story actually started a little earlier than that. It was my senior year in college. At the time, my dad had one of the earliest Tesla Model S's when they came out. This was way back in 2018. And my dad, he was moving out of state for a new job, and he didn't need a car anymore. So he was going to sell the car. But I was so in love with this car, and I so wanted to keep it in the family that I somehow managed to convince him, listen, give me the car. I'll find a way to pay you for the lease every month. It was like $1,000 a month that I had to pay my dad. No way of paying it. It was kind of like coming out of a no income college budget, right? And so I didn't really have a plan. I was just like, look, I just want the car. Give it to me. I'll figure out how to make it work, and go from there. So this was all while I was studying and finishing my degree in biomedical engineering. I always thought I'd end up becoming a doctor, and I was always passionate about science. So this is where I was headed. Um, the car came along. I realized very, very quickly that I had to find a way to pay for it. And so I started kind of this side project, this side hustle of like renting it out and, trying to get, hey, maybe if I can share this thing, maybe I can make a little bit of extra money. I'd be able to own it. Wait a minute, what if it actually makes some money? And not only do I get to own this really cool car that I can't afford, but actually makes me some money too. How cool would that be? Anyway, that was the pipe dream, and I kind of gave it like a very half-assed approach. I was kind of just rented it out of my dorm room. At the time I had like an actual legit uh like working opportunity at Mass General Hospital in Boston. We were doing this was kind of like senior year was winding down. I'd gotten this job. We were doing research in Alzheimer's, and I was given this project at work to see if I could figure out, you know, some of the earliest stages, signs of Alzheimer's, way before, the typical symptoms start showing up. So there was this kind of computer online test where a stimulus would appear on the screen and you push a corresponding button. And I was given the job of like analyzing the data and seeing if we could find any patterns. And to great amazement, especially mine, there was an incredible amount of value in that data. I was able to put together a quick assessment and find that by analyzing some of the patterns that we were seeing and how people are approaching against the stimulus, you could identify people way early on, years before things came up, with like 90% accuracy. It was incredible. So went on a tour across the country, started, published a paper on it. This was going to be an amazing like jump ahead in my career. Like I'm not even out of college, and this is a pretty significant breakthrough. And I thought like this is going to be it, man. This is amazing. Like forget about this car thing on the side. It's not even that important. Um, but then as soon as we get back to the office and the fanfare kind of dies down, my principal investigator, my boss, basically, he says, "Oh, this is a great job. Let's move on to the next project." And I was kind of like, I was a bit stunned. I was kind of floored. I was like, hey, we just discovered something pretty amazing here. Like this needs to be developed into something. We got to build out like a test, public, get in the hands of doctors, get it to people's homes. This is really important. Um, and no matter how many times I pushed to keep working on this project and developing into something useful, the answer I kept getting back was, listen, we published our paper. That's all we need to do. Now we move on to the next thing. And, I really struggled with this for a long time until I just realized that, at least, and this is very common in a lot of research institutions, they get their money through grants, which means that basically the number of papers you publish determines your funding. So it just kind of hit me that this isn't going to go anywhere. Like we made this amazing research. It's just going to sit there. We're going to do more amazing research. It's just going to sit there as well. And there's no opportunity to build anything with it. And I was so kind of heartbroken that I had like a full-on identity crisis. It was like a whole prospect of like I was going to be this doctor, this researcher, and now I'm realizing like I just had this feeling of like nothing I'm going to do matters. Obviously it does in many ways, but that was the feeling I had. I felt that I was not satisfied with that trajectory. So through this kind of like self-crisis, I kind of just said, you know what? Here's the reality. I just graduated. I'm never going to be as young as I am right now. I'm never going to have as few responsibilities as I have right now. I don't have kids to take care of. I don't have a mortgage to pay off. Why not? Let's give it a shot. Let's take a little break and see if I can make this car thing work. And just kind of threw myself into that full time.
Man, that's awesome. And I agree with you. I think when you're young, when you're in college, this is the time to try these crazy ideas because you'll never be at a spot in your life where you really have less responsibility than you do when you're in college.
Yeah.
So now's
Yeah.
the time to try it and just see if it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like that's okay. I think there's minimal damage when you're in college. So I think now's the time to try it. And I'm sure not everything worked perfectly with this car idea. What was like the craziest thing that happened in those early days of renting out the Tesla? And what did that teach you about business that you couldn't learn in a classroom at Boston?
Oh man. Like to say that I was in over my head is like the understatement of the century. Like this car just got abused, like a poor, unfortunate child. As soon as it started renting out, it got dented, scratched, smoked in, not brought back on time. Probably the craziest thing that happened like early on is somebody used my car to rob a bank. Like they rented my car and then they robbed the bank with it.
Wow.
And it's just, and that's kind of like, and that's when I realized I was really like this. I had signed up for something I have no idea what I'm doing. Um, the best way to describe uh, what idea of sharing a car looks like. First of all, there's no such thing as sharing a car, right? It's that you only become the world's tiniest car rental company. That's it. There's no in-betweens. And the reason is because like a vehicle or really any asset that you're sharing or renting out, but especially a vehicle, you know, it's a very expensive piece of machinery that you're handing off to somebody. The analogy I like to use is it's like giving someone a gun. You know, you give someone a gun and you're like crossing your fingers that they're not going to shoot somebody with it. They're going to bring it back to you on time, undamaged, and that they promise they know how to use this thing responsibly, right? That's what you're doing when you give someone a car. So I think that entire prospect and of kind of being in that space, it just made me realize what they never teach you about going out in the real world is that like what you think people are supposed to do or will want to do is almost never what they actually do. You know, like you kind of have this expectation of how things work. Oh, I book a car, I pick up the car, I return the car. What happens if somebody doesn't return the car? You know, like that's the very first lesson that you learn, and I think it's critical for business everywhere, right? Like wherever people are like water, you know, wherever there's a crack, they will seep through. And unless you create a really bulletproof system that makes it very, very, very hard for them to seep through, they will seep through and they will abuse your product, they will abuse your service, you know. This idea, like we all have an idea of what things want to be, but until you build a system that actually forces it to be that way, it's not going to be that way.
Yeah. I'm sure the college students now, they all have this idea for a business in their head, whether it be a product or a service that they want to bring to market. So, how do they know if this idea that they have in their head is actually worth going all in?
Well, the first thing you should ask yourself is like, what can go wrong? You know, like how does this blow up in my face? That is number one, right? Like if your idea involves you know, bankrupting your entire generation, you know, like your entire family in order to go in on something, maybe don't start there. You know, like there's easier, safer ways to kind of test the waters. I think realistically, it's just a matter of just start small, do something, you know, try things out and then learn quickly and keep going. I mean, this is the same advice any or will tell you, any kind of gurus or podcasts will say. Just iterate. Just don't be afraid to fail. Just get out there and start learning as soon as you can.
Mhm. Now, the next question is, how do we get to scale? Because I, as somebody who owns a car right now, I can see how I can rent out that one car, but you turned it into
Yeah.
thousands across 30 cities. So,
Yeah.
what were the first three moves that actually created momentum for this company?
Well, the first one was realizing what the actual problem is, right? The and this is, I think, a mistake that many founders do, right? With me, I thought, okay, what's my problem? My problem is I need to rent out more cars. That wasn't actually my problem. My problem was I don't have a good solution for how to share this thing safely, right? That was my problem. If you solve the problem of sharing, if I know how I can give my car to Michael, having never met him, and that I know that Michael has everything that he needs to effectively and safely, you know, get into the car, learn everything that he's supposed to do, get his questions answered, bring it back on time, do all the payment, all the processing. Okay, then great. We've got a solution that off that we can build off the next thing. So that's number one, is actually figure out what your problem is and fall in love with solving that problem. Because until you do that, if your problem is just like, oh, I need to get this more product and more people's, you don't know what you're actually solving for. You got to understand what's the real issue. Number two is get people that can help you build it. The reality is, even if you're a solo entrepreneur, a entrepreneur, as we say, right? The reality is nobody does this alone. And Scott Galloway has this amazing quote where he says, you know, your greatness is in the agency of others. You only succeed because other people let you succeed. That's the truth of it, right? And so that success can come from I've got a partner and a great team that's what builds it. But realistically, you need to start viewing your customers as your team because they're the ones who get to say whether you succeed or you fail. Getting the right people at every level there is your job as the founder. It's figuring out who those people are, who the people that should be directly in your company to work for you, and who the people that you should be selling to. Because choosing your customers is as important, if not more important, than the people who are actually working alongside you. And nowhere is this more poignant than the car rental business. Okay, if I've got you know like a guy who lives in the suburb with three kids and he's never had any speeding tickets in his life, that's going to be a much better customer than someone who just got out of jail for grand theft auto, right? Like and so picking kind of where you're aiming to sell your product, that's where you want to be. Um, and then the third thing that you kind of realize that's a big mover is that you got to just learn resilience, right? You're going to get a crap ton of no's and a crap ton of disappointments before something breaks through. And I think when you talk to, I think a lot of entrepreneurs that you might look up to, they all say something pretty similar, which is that it's a very, very long road of pain and disappointment and marginal, if any, improvement or growth. And then all of a sudden things just explode because you hit that rhythm. You found finally what it is that you're trying to solve. You finally have the right group of people around you. And now the thing can take off. One of the things that you have to unlearn, because our society really optimizes you for instant gratification, instantly getting what you want, and kind of like and just being funneled into this yes, yes, no, no kind of mindset. The reality is if you want this, if you've got a vision and you take it forward, you have to understand that it's going to take years. You have to be okay with that. And you got to come into it with that mindset because otherwise there's nothing worse than somebody who gives up at year 3 when on year 4 it would have worked, right? And so you have to have that mindset.
You're so right. I mean, so many college students today, I mean, they want to get rich quick and it's all to the moon, like, yesterday. And I'm just sitting there scratching my head and I'm like, yeah, you need to give this stuff time to work through. And it does take patience, which is really important. The other thing, too, is I think a lot of college students that want to create their own company, they think that they need funding in order to start the business. And so they're just so focused on the funding part of it. What did bootstrapping this company force you to learn that actually made the business stronger?
Yeah, well, look, funding, people talk about funding as if it's like this magical force, like you got funding and now you're successful. It's actually not true. Funding is you manage to convince some schmuck to give you money, you know, to I shouldn't even say give you money, to let you borrow money, because
Borrow.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
You actually just borrow against the future, right? When you take an investment, you didn't just get $1 million. What you got is a loan that's going to cost you, let's say, however successful you are in the future, $10 million, $100 million, whatever it is actually going to be. People got to understand that generally, venture capital and funding is your most expensive financing apparatus, right? A loan that you get from a bank is going to have a set interest rate, which is going to be orders of magnitude lower than what your equity is going to cost in the future if you succeed. So people have this vision that funding is the be all end all, right? They'll spend all this time focusing on pitching. Pitching is very important. And I will be the first to say that for a lot of businesses, a lot of concepts, um, funding is actually what you need. You need team, you need, a lot of tech products, for example. You build the product first and then you get the customers. You can't convince someone to give you money without a product. So that's true for a lot of businesses. Funding is important. At the same time, uh, it's just one thing. It's just financing, right? You have to so many other aspects of your business that uh, in the product, in the service, in the efficiency that you're operating under. Uh, and funding is not going to do any of that for you. It's just going to maybe help you hire if you need to, honestly. So I would remind anybody who's kind of thinking about running their business. Entrepreneurs, I've seen this all the time. They tend to focus like 80% of their energy on focusing on actually funding and a lot less on the actual product. The reality is, if you have a killer product and a customer base and you've already gotten to that point, funding will just fly at you and it'll be at a much cheaper rate than it was at the beginning. And here's the key part that nobody really tells you. Funding can unlock you and take you to the moon, but you got to really know what you're doing. That's the sad truth, right? Um, I can just tell you I started this business when I was 23. I'm 30 today. If you'd given me $5 million at 20, I would have run this thing into the ground like an idiot in a way that you have no, like, I just had no idea what I was doing,
Yeah.
right? I didn't even know where to put the money. Like, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Today, with actual experience, you understand implicitly how capital gives you leverage in certain spaces, how to deploy it effectively, and how to, know when to save it for a better day and when to use it right now rapidly. But one thing that money would have absolutely screwed me over had I gotten it early on would have been not being able to figure out my unit economics. And this is what a lot of businesses that get very, very big and then collapse run into. Uh, a lot of times when you get funding, the the pressure that you're getting from your investors, because now you have a boss too. People forget this. You got funding, now you have a boss. Um, the pressure that you get is grow really, really fast. Figure out how to be profitable later. First, we grow, dominate the market, and then we cut payroll. We let some people go. We update our pricing structure, and then bam, now we're going to be wealthy and stable. Yeah, no. Like I'm sorry to tell you that, but if you grew super, super rapidly by having upside down unit economics, now you have a bunch of customers that are getting your product for basically free, and now you have to convince them to try and pay for it. Well, guess what? That whole thing is going to collapse in on itself. And coming from the mobility industry where people are using cars, um, in the 2010s to early 2020s, there were just countless mobility startups that made crazy like 9, 10 figure valuations and now don't even exist anymore, right? Because the unit economics were all upside down. So I was blessed because I did try funding early on. No one was willing to give me money. I ended up saying, you know what, screw it. Instead of convincing someone to build it, let's just build it. And now we're in a much better position because our unit economics were there from day one. We knew that we could grow this and scale would be to our benefit, not to our detriment.
Mm. Well, let's talk about scaling because I think you were able to do that using some really good systems. And I think there's a lesson there because you say that trust doesn't scale, systems do. So, how can students apply that mindset in leadership roles, maybe in their student organization on campus at Boston University?
Yeah, of course. So the first thing you got to remember is that, everything that you do as your own person is a system already. It's just an internal system. But the problem with an internal system is that it's opaque to other people and it's opaque to you, So maybe if you've got people that are working at your organization or on your team, and you've got this process that you subconsciously follow to manage people and take care of people, you might not even be aware of what you're doing that's working or not working. So the first thing that you should be doing is just observing the systems that are currently going on. And more often than not, at the individual scale, these systems are habits and they're, just how you talk to people. Maybe you've got people that you're working with that, these are your friends. So you automatically trust them to do the right thing or to act in your best interest.
Mhm.
Here's the problem. This is where trust doesn't scale. When you start expecting that people behave the way that you do, that's usually because there's a set of incentives there that are inbuilt that you are not aware of. So let's take a classic example of, you and your buddy are running an organization and you trust that your buddy is going to do the work that he said he's going to do, right? Well, what's the incentive for him to do the work that he's going to do? Well, he's your friend. So your opinion is actually part of the mechanism that keeps him aligned and on the ground, you know. But if you were gone for 3 months, maybe you went to a semester abroad and he's supposed to manage all things are out of there. And now there's a different person that he's not friends with, that he doesn't, they don't have the same kind of rapport. How confident are you that he's going to perform the same way and keep the organization running along the same way? Well, probably not as confident. And that's because you depended on a system that had these implicit incentives for certain types of behavior. Um, but as soon as you walked away from those incentives without even realizing it, the behavior is going to change. So one of your jobs as a founder and as anybody who's operating in an organization is to really understand what these incentives are, because people operate based on incentives. I like to say that, you know, let's take a spectrum of human behavior, and maybe we'll bring this back to cars because it's just easier to visualize, right? When I give a car to a renter, let's just say that on one side of a spectrum is a total angel that will do the right thing at any given opportunity, no matter how difficult it is to do that thing. And on the other side of the spectrum is, a complete maniac who, you know, his main goal is to cause ultimate chaos, right? So most people, 99% of people will lie somewhere between that spectrum. They're not this or they're not that. And so that means that where you put the friction or remove the friction is just going to make it much more likely for people to go in that direction. So let's say that somebody is renting my car and they get a flat tire. Okay. In a situation where they get a flat tire, they're on their way to, a weekend trip with all their friends. They got to get to the Airbnb. They're going to be late, you know, and they can't contact me as the car owner. They don't have any car support. They don't know, there's no spare tire, there's no instructions, they don't know what to do. There's a very solid chance that, like, just because of that lack of information, the amount of friction it takes to solve this problem, they might just say, you know what, I'm just going to leave the car here. I'm going to call an Uber and I got to get to my hotel, you know?
Mhm.
And what does that do? That causes, like, that car is now stranded in the freeway. It's probably going to get towed, impounded, causes a ton of costs on all sides. It might get damaged while it's there. The damages just blow up. It just gets worse and worse. As
Mhm.
opposed to, somebody is driving, they get a flat tire. You are actually, because you're connected to the car, are proactively calling them and saying, "Hey, we noticed that the car tire pressure is low. Do you need support?" Oh, of course, no problem. We already dispatched someone over to you with the spare tire. It's patched up, it's on the way, you're ready to go. Took less than 20 minutes. And that's the difference between having a friction and incentive system that keeps people going the direction you want them to go, as opposed to makes it hard for them to do what you want them to. I want them to continue on their trip and not abandon the car. Do I make it easy or do I make it hard? Right. And that's what you got to always be thinking about as you're thinking about installing systems so that you can scale them.
That's an excellent, excellent example. Obviously, you have this EV mobility platform today in 2026. But as you think about side hustles and college students, are there any other areas that students should be thinking about in terms of opportunity in 2026?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be extremely biased. I think, one of the opportunities uh, is you should get a car and throw it on the Eon platform, because that is the quickest, easiest way to start a business without having to take on all of the challenges. Our entire philosophy at the company is we want to take these assets that typically depreciate, lose you money, and just become a liability that burns a hole in your pocket and turn them into assets, something that you can use to get around work, to get to school, makes you money, actually earns value for you. And with vehicles specifically, this is one of the few places where you can get really get funding for your business in the easiest way possible. Everybody can go and get a car loan, right? It's so much harder. Go to the bank and try to convince them to give you, 100K to start your drop shipping business.
No,
Okay? That's not going to happen. The
no.
answer is a no, right? But you can get a car that you can use, that you can now throw on the platform, start earning money that pays you back more than you're paying on the loan. And the best part is, let's say your circumstances change. Maybe you're not as making as much money as you should in the market that you're in. Maybe you decide to, you got a better opportunity somewhere across the country. You just sell the car and you're on, and that's the end of it, right? A lot of businesses have this kind of outsized risk and this really high barrier to entry to get started. Um, what we did with Eon is we lowered both, right? So obviously it's half a pitch for what we do, but it's also, what I really think about, like, if you want to get started and learn the ropes of business, there's probably no easier way to get started. Aside from that, I would say that, a lot of people are really scared right now with just how much AI seems to be taking over with the capabilities that it presents. You know, this is where I would say it's time. The best thing that you could do as a business person to get into the business mindset, we tend to do this thing as human beings where we have a set expectation things should be. And then when we are presented with facts that that expectation is not true, we get really stressed out, right? The best thing that you could do is develop a muscle where you go back and re-examine those expectations. AI could be the situation where, your entry level job is much harder to get now because a lot of people are using AI to do entry level. That's true. But if you change your expectation, instead of I need to get an entry level job, maybe it's this is my opportunity to start my business. And now AI can manage a lot of your web design, your copy, your customer support. All of a sudden, there's an immense opportunity here. What we got to remember always as entrepreneurs is that the landscape will change whether we like it or not. The question is, are you evaluating where's the new opportunity, or are you kind of doggedly going, I already made my decision about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to kind of ignore or get stressed out because the landscape just made it harder to do that. So I wouldn't tell you like what industry is the best to go into. I just don't have the facts, but I will tell you that developing that mindset of there's opportunity everywhere, you just have to be willing to reassess your priors. That's what I would say is probably the best piece of advice on where to go with things.
Yeah, opportunity is absolutely abundant. You need to be looking for it. And I think it's different for each person. So that's why I really just, on an individual basis, forget about what your parents want you to do. Think about where you see opportunity, and then go down and chase it. And you're the expert in cars, so I'm really kind of curious about your answer here. Do you think 10 years from now, it's 2026 now, in 2036, will college students even own cars, or will everything be subscription based?
You're definitely going to see a ton more subscription based. And by the way, if you need a car subscription, pop over to eonrides.com and we'll take care of you. But you're definitely seeing a shift away from ownership. What owning a car has a lot of different, impracticalities. You got to find and pay for parking, manage your insurance, do your renewals, all of these different aspects that are just a lot to juggle, right? And as people become more and more mobile, you want to keep your options open, right? You want to be able to kind of jump from one place to another. An opportunity comes this way or that way. You don't want to be locked in necessarily, right? You like I don't recommend people in college lock themselves into a 6 year lease. I don't think that that's a great idea. Realistically, people will always own cars. There are going to be situations and places where it's just the smartest, most cost effective thing to do. If you're living out in the countryside or in the suburbs and this is the way to get around, then yeah, you're very likely going to own a car. But if you are living in a dense urban environment and you don't need to take on this additional risk, don't do it. Don't forget that like your capital being wrapped up in an asset that loses value uh could be quite a challenge. Again, if you're doing it as a jumping into a business, that's a completely different story. But if you're doing it just to get around, there are alternatives today that are just way better and way less long-term restricting than going in and owning a car. So I 100% there will be college students that own cars in 2036, no question. But you're going to see a lot fewer for sure.
Yeah, really nice. All right, I get the sense that you know some good food and you've been to some really good restaurants in Boston. That's just what my instinct tells me, and I love good food. So the next time I end up in Boston, where should I be going for a great meal?
Oh my God, you got to go to Celeste in Somerville. This is like if you're into ceviche, Peruvian food,
Yeah.
great cocktails. Wow. So like this place, every time I pop in Boston, I have to go there. It's I mean, it's my favorite Peruvian food I've ever had. And Boston's a great town for food
Oh
anyway.
my God,
You're
yeah.
gonna you're gonna love it out there.
Yeah, seafood is incredible. But yeah, Celeste is definitely the spot to hit. I'm going to go and check that out the next time I'm in town for sure. So, if our college students want to use your rental service or they want a subscription-based car, how can they get started on your platform?
So easy. Just go to eonrides.com or download the Eon app. Just type in Eon into the App Store. We're the first result. You get the process is so easy. You download the app. It's like Airbnb. You search for the car that you want. You book it. You do a quick verification in the app. Then you literally walk up to the car, get in, and go in 40 seconds. The app is a Bluetooth key, so you don't even have to pull it out of your pocket. As soon as you walk up to the car, it unlocks automatically for you. You get in and you go. And if you need any help during your trip, we got 24/7 support. And people are there. We see if the car breaks down, we can dispatch help immediately to your location. So it's about as easy as it gets.
That's awesome. Eonrides.com, or even easier, go and download the app. And this has been awesome. Ray, thank you so much for coming up with this platform. Thank you so much for just giving your advice to other college students. I'm sure you've helped out a lot of college students today just with your words and thinking about opportunities. So we appreciate it. And thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Michael. You're a
You
great
got it.
host, and I love to talk to you.
Hey, it was my pleasure. And to everybody who listened, I'm sure you learned something from Ray today. So, what I want you to do is, I want you to share this episode with your entire chapter. Drop a link to this interview in a group chat, share it on social media. You really never know who needs to hear this message from Ray today. There's a lot of entrepreneurs on college campuses today, and I am sure they're going to learn something from this episode. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.